In this video, we're gonna take a look at this Sigma 85mm F1.4 telephoto lens for full frame cameras. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer and a Lumix ambassador. And in this video, we're gonna take a look at this Sigma 85mm F1.4 short telephoto lens. This is quite a new lens. This was launched in September 2020, so this is a few months old product. And this is available for the L mount, of course, for Lumix and Leica cameras and Sigma cameras, and also for the Sony E mount. And a fast 85 like this is often referred as the portrait lens, but of course this can be used anywhere that requires a short telephoto lens. Maybe some indoor sports like basketball or landscapes or whatever, wherever you need a short telephoto lens. Alright, let's dive into it and first check out the build quality, which is excellent. I think Sigma has done an awesome job with their lenses since the first art lens in 2012, was it? The 35mm f1.4 art. That was the first lens, and I think it came out in 2012. And this lens is made of aluminum and something that Sigma calls TSC. Those letters stand for thermally stable composite that Sigma uses on many of their lenses. And the structure is dust and splash proof as well, so you can use this in some tough conditions if required. This lens also feels really nice and solid when you handle it, and everything is really smooth. The aperture ring and also the focus ring, and it feels like a premium lens. The aperture ring has a couple of extra features. First of all, there's a switch on the side of the lens that you can use to de-click the aperture ring. So it's completely smooth, which is very nice for video shooting. Then you can have these extra smooth exposure changes if you need something like that. But for photography, the clicks are of course much more practical. And then there's another switch on the other side of the lens that you can use to lock the aperture ring to the A position, just in case you want to control your aperture from your camera. And you can also use the same switch to prevent the aperture ring from accidentally slipping onto the A position. Then you can have hard stops at both ends of the aperture scale, and you don't have to worry that you accidentally turn the ring past f16 to the A position. Also a very nice feature. And then of course there is the switch for autofocus and manual focus, and one function button as well. And to be able to configure the lens function button, you have to go to the cog menu and then to the lens/others menu. And there you can find the lens function button setting. You can't find the lens button settings where you find all the other function button settings. I think that's good to remember. This Sigma is actually quite compact for what it is. The included lens hood is quite big, but once you remove the hood, you can see that the lens is actually quite compact for what it is. Of course, a lens like this is never gonna be like really compact and pocket size because it's a fast 85, but still for a fast 85 this is quite compact, and I'm really happy to see it like this, because the trend in the lens design has been during the past years that it doesn't really matter how big the lens is as long as it's optically great. But I disagree. I think the size matters, and a compact lens is always nicer than a big lens. This Sigma weighs in at about 630 grams and the filter size is 77 millimeters. The balance on the camera is really good. My cameras, the S1 and Lumix S1 and S1R that I used to try this lens are quite big camera bodies, and on these cameras this lens feels really well balanced, but I believe that it would also feel really good on some of the smaller cameras like the Lumix S5. But now let me share a couple of pictures that I shot on this lens, and then we talk more about the sharpness and all that important stuff. Enjoy the pictures. I hope you enjoyed the pictures, and if you really enjoyed this video, you can also buy me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below. And before I talk about the sharpness, let's check out the optical construction really quickly, and then we can talk about the sharpness and autofocus performance. The optical formula is 15 elements in 11 groups, and that includes 5 SLD elements and 1 spherical element. There are 11 curved aperture blades, and the smallest aperture is f16. And the minimum focusing distance is 0.85 meters, which is quite normal for a short telephoto like this. And this lens has no optical stabilizer, but that's not a big problem, at least on Lumix cameras, because the in-body stabilizer is quite effective and it's able to stabilize this kind of a short telephoto easily. And I had no problem with shaky pictures when I tried this lens. And then the sharpness, and this lens is sharp at every aperture, even wide open. This is really sharp, and of course it gets a bit sharper when you stop down, like every lens, but you mainly get more depth of field when you stop down, not that much more sharpness. There is some vignetting wide open, which is also natural, and every lens has some vignetting. But if you want to get rid of it, you can do that in post, or just stop down a little bit and the vignetting goes away. There are absolutely no chromatic aberrations visible and no distortions visible, but I suspect there is some in-camera correction going on with the distortions. But they are not visible, and that's what matters. And then about the autofocus. Let's first talk about autofocus in photography, and I have nothing to complain about that. For my type of photography, the autofocus works really well. It's fast and accurate. I have nothing to complain about. But at the beginning of this video, I said that this type of lens might be suitable also for some indoor sports. I don't shoot that kind of stuff, and I can't tell you if the autofocus would be good enough for, let's say, basketball or something like that. Sorry about that. And I also tried this lens for video, and I made a very simple autofocus test also. And I shot at 4K 24p, and I used the face recognition continuous autofocus, and my camera settings for autofocus you can see here. And I have to say that in this test, this lens didn't do that well. But you have to remember that this is only one simple test, and you can't apply the results to all situations. But in comparison, here you can see how the Lumix S50mm F1.4 did in the same situation. And as you can see, it can follow my movement much better. But if you don't need continuous autofocus, then this can make quite pretty looking video footage too. Before I go to my conclusion, let's check out a couple of alternatives for this lens. And the first alternative, of course, is the other Sigma 85 1.4, the predecessor of this lens. But that lens is a lot bigger and heavier than this, and it's not any better optically. So I don't think it makes much sense after all. And the other alternative, of course, is the Lumix S85mm F1.8, which I'm not sure if it's available yet, but if it's not, it will be available very soon. And that lens is slightly smaller and lighter than this one, and it's also a little bit more affordable. And the difference between f1.8 and f1.4 is not that big after all in real life shooting. The price for this Sigma is around 1,200 euros or US dollars, which I think is really reasonable. I think the major upsides with this lens are that it's well built, it's weather sealed, it's quite compact, and it's sharp. And the only kind of downside I can think of is the continuous autofocus in video, at least with Lumix cameras. But if you're not shooting video, then I can't figure out any major downsides. And before you go, you may also want to check out my photo walk with this lens some weeks ago. Thank you so much again, and see you in the next one.